and welcome all of you to the third InSession Live of the 2025 legislative session. We're in week 3, and it is Thursday, January 30th at 12:01. Thank you for joining us here today or for watching the recording. I am happy to be able to share with you that we are 88 days left of the legislative session. Things are moving extraordinarily quickly. There are less bills in the House education side than we've seen previously as they're focused on doing work sessions, but there are many bills coming through the budget committees as well as Senate education. So we are really just trying to keep up with our eye on the first policy cutoff, which will occur February 21st. In the meantime, I've asked some of our partners and school directors who are in various roles to share some insights about particular bills that might impact you or your district, and also invite you to provide feedback and ideas for considerations today and future in-session lives. So before we dig in too much further, I want to acknowledge that our public schools and facilities operate on the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples. And as we engage in the 2025 legislative session, we remember that these lands of our state capital were cared for by the people of the Squaxin and Nisqually tribes. We make these acknowledgments because we want to open a space of recognition, inclusion, and respect for our sovereign tribal partners and all Indigenous students, families, staff, legislators, and board members in our community statewide. A little bit about being in the know. I wanted to share with you that on the Washington State Legislature online, it is difficult at this phase in the game to have bill numbers to memory, but we're getting there. We've got a couple that we know we're following and tracking, and you are never expected to do that, although I start to build up my number capacity in my brain. But what I wanted to share with you is if you're curious about trying to find something by topic, what is available to you to do so. So I'm going to stop my share with the calendar here or the schedule and pull up the Washington State Legislature online website just to give you a little tutorial about how to navigate. And if you are on actually going to the main page under bills and initiatives, you can type in a bill number here, but because you might not have it memorized, or maybe you're not looking directly from a bill watch list, you can go to the bills page and look at bills by topic. The direct link is actually in the agenda. But what I wanted to just share with you as a caveat is that it's not as easy as I wish it were. You can't just type in curriculum or world languages or dual credit and find something directly. Maybe we'll get there someday. But in the meantime, there's a drop-down menu of all the various subjects, largely connected to RCW titles and categories. There is really, so if you're like, oh, it must be under education, right? Nope, it is not under education as you scroll down. There is an education drop down, but it's about the State Board of Education. So you're actually probably not going to find what you're looking for there unless you're specifically looking for something around State Board. However, if you continue to scroll down towards the bottom of the alphabet, you will find school districts. There's also the School Directors Association, where you will find bills that specifically reference us this session. But your best bet and probably what you're looking for may be under schools and school districts. So you will see that there are quite a few bills listed here. Gosh, a very long list. I would just caution you that this is likely not all of them. Many of the bills that impact the K-12 space aren't necessarily in the RCW 28A, and it is my understanding that the bills listed here directly affect the RCW 28A, which is the Basic Education Act section of the revised Code of Washington. So it's a good hearty list. Maybe what you're looking for is here, but if you're looking for something and it's not here, or you want to be sure you're getting a more comprehensive list, I would point you back to the WSSDA or WASA bill watches that are on our various websites and have an even more extensive list than that. And on both of those documents, you could actually look for a bill title topic with the find feature. either in Word or in PDF. So just a little pro tip for you if you're trying to navigate this on your own. But more importantly, I would just remind you, if you're looking for something, you can always reach out to me directly and I'll do everything I can to help you find it. So, looking at what we've got ahead of us for today, we've got some really awesome guest speakers who are going to share some insights with you. That includes Jim from the Rural Education Center, Laura from Mount Vernon, and Nikki from Spokane, and also your WASDA Vice President, and field questions and share some things that are going on this week and next week. And with that, I don't want to take any more time off from the great insights that we're about to hear. So I'm going to invite Jim to go ahead and turn on his screen. Maybe share a little bit about who you are, Jim. If for some reason our members don't know you, I can't believe that's possible. But in case that were the fact, of a quick introduction, and I'll pull up your presentation as you're doing that.
Well, thank you, Marissa. Again, I almost said for the record because I've been testifying a lot lately. So, uh, but my name is Jim Kokowski. I'm a retired superintendent. I served as a superintendent for 23 years in our state, 8 years in Pomeroy, and then 15 years in Davenport. And I continue to serve as director of the Rural Ed Center. The Rural Ed Center is an organization. All of the finances are run through ESD 101, and we're connected with WSU, but it's a voluntary organization that districts choose to join. And basically, what we try and do is the Rural Ed Center is just advocate for the special needs and circumstances of small districts, which are often very similar to large districts, and just have a place in the room, jumping up and down the back of the room, saying, "Hey, don't forget our small rural schools," because we are the majority of the school districts, but we're only about collectively about 10% of the state student population, but we're still very important. So, and then this first slide, I am a visual learner. So the visuals here is the VW van, which I'll talk a little bit about. There's a bill that will allow us to use other transportation besides the school bus to transport kids and get some funding for it. The big three, obviously, you've heard about the big three. I know Marissa has done a great job educating you on that. The picture below that, it's Senator Wellman. And this was a hearing a couple weeks ago on the 55% majority. And Tim Eyman spoke and said this was violating the Constitution. Well, the bill would also include, would ask the voters to change the Constitution. Transitional kindergarten, I'll talk about that briefly. And then clean buildings performance standards. That's a lot right there. But anyhow, the Rural Ed Center is made up of over 100 small rural districts across the state. We also have several members, including WSSDA. WSSDA has been a really active and great partner with the Rural Ed Center, along with WASA, most of the ESDs, and OSPI. Next. This is I know Marissa drills this point home a lot with each of you, but I don't underestimate the importance of advocacy and the impact advocacy can have. You may remember last session, there was a bill by Representative Sin to require every school district in a couple years, any new bus would have to be purchased, would have to be a zero emissions bus. Great idea, but we're not there. The infrastructure is not there. And a number of board members, superintendents, bus folks were able to get a whole legislature actively participate in committee hearings, and the bill got changed to you'll be required to purchase electric school buses, zero emission school buses, only at a time when they're just as efficient or more efficient than our current structure. So that was a good bill, and that I think really would not have happened if folks hadn't really weighed in on it. Next, I'll talk about a couple bills. This is 5009. This is a bill. It was a different bill number last year because the bill numbers change each biennium. But bill almost made it through last year. But this bill would allow districts of any size if there are sometimes you may not have enough drivers, so it's someone, a teacher or principal, superintendent. I did that several times. I didn't drive the old school bus because I wasn't certified, but I would take the school suburban or van and transport kids home or go get kids if we couldn't find a driver. That's not uncommon. And some routes, even in larger districts, some of the routes may only have a few kids. So it might be more efficient to use a school suburban or van or car. So what this bill would allow, and it's sponsored by Senator Braun, but co-sponsored by Senator Wellman. So we have an R and a D, which is always good to see on any bills. But it would allow you, the school board to make the determination if a vehicle is safe, and then allow that the school district to transport kids in that vehicle, and then uh, be able to get reimbursement dollars for transportation dollars, but also reimbursement dollars. As all of you probably know, as board directors, when you purchase a school car, a vehicle, van, uh, you may be able to use CTE funds, but other than that, you're pretty much taking out of levy dollars. There's no, the state doesn't provide funding for any school vehicles other than a school bus. And this one will have executive session action in the Senate on February 5th, so next week. Next. This is the bill I mentioned at the start, 55%. And I put it, Marissa asked if I would say the bills that the Rural Ed Center loves or hates. We love any bill that's going to reduce the threshold to pass a bond, whether it be 55% or 50%. I have a personal view that 55% is reasonable, uh, but whether it's 55 or 50%, there are some districts that don't have the assessed valuation and a tax base to even if they could pass a bond to get enough money. So that's another issue legislature's going to have to work on. But this one is good. Let the people decide. It requires a change in the Constitution. Many years ago, when the simple majority measure passed the legislature finally for levies, it went to the voters on election night. It was failing, and it barely passed, a little over 50%. And that was when public education was viewed by the general public maybe in a more positive light than now. Anyhow, so that's a little bit on that bill, which we're just waiting for a hearing, or excuse me, waiting for um, I put the bottom 1032. So next slide, Marissa. I hope I'm not confusing folks. So this is, I did the previous slide and then I was checking the schedule last night when it came out, so I didn't update it. But 1032, the previous bill for 55% is had a hearing and we're just waiting for it to be hopefully scheduled for executive session. The bill on the House side is simple majority, 50%. So we have two bills, a little bit different, 50-55, but they both again reduce the percentage of for passing bonds. And this will be heard next week in the February 4th, which is Monday, I believe. Excuse me, Tuesday in the House Education Committee. You've heard about the big three. You've heard Marissa talk extensively about this, along with Dan Steele and other advocates from the different organizations. But we've got great traction on the big three, and in the Senate. Actually this morning. I haven't checked yet. Marissa may know because the meeting just probably got, I don't know if it's still going or not, Marissa, if they go 2 hours, but they're going to be in executive session. Again, that's where executive sessions are an open public arena, but the public isn't allowed to give any input during an executive session. It's different than your executive sessions, but they can have a bill, they'll discuss it, they'll sometimes have amendments. They often will stop, break into their caucus meetings, which is kind of their executive sessions. So they'll be deciding on those, the bills that were heard in the Senate on the big three. They were doing that earlier today. Next. Oh, can you go back, Marissa? Sorry. This I think is important. You may have some, as a board member, you put a stake in the ground on something that you feel is extremely important, and maybe collectively, hopefully, as a board, it's certainly more powerful if it's all the board is and the administration is with it or believes in it. But this is something that I think we do have to put a stake in the ground, because MSOCs, I don't know of any district that is doing extremely well with MSOCs. Particularly because of the cost of liability and property insurance, but other things too, fuel, inflation. But districts are hurting big time. Your ability to use your levy funds for enrichment is less and less because MSOC expenses, revenue's not keeping up with it. Special ed, you may be below the cap of 16%, but you may have a student or students in your district, high needs, high cost. And we definitely need more assistance for special ed and then also for transportation. We've got to get a much better funding formula. Okay, next. House Appropriations this afternoon is going to be having some hearings. Now it's just on special ed. So the Senate dealt with transportation, MSOCs, and special ed. The House right now has some bills that are pending. Those are on the bill watch that Marissa has for you, but the only ones going to be here today are special ed. Again, very important. This is another one that this impacts all districts, and depending upon the square footage of the buildings in your district, uh, if you're smaller, you still have to follow some regulations and guidelines by the Department of Commerce for the Clean Buildings Performance Standards. But this bill was Senator Wellman heard from a number of school districts when she would visit school districts during the off season, and this bill proposes a 10-year pause uh, or extension on, because if you don't meet these requirements, there's some stiff penalties. And these upgrades that are going to be needed are not funded. There are some grants that are available, but this is one that we certainly support, and I think this would benefit all school districts. If you want to go ahead and do it, and you've done it, and you've had, say, a bond project recently, or your buildings or meet the green buildings performance standards, fantastic. But a lot of districts haven't, and then they don't have the resources right now to try and meet this another unfunded mandate, and that's going to be heard. It moved on to a different committee. There's some additional slides that I provided for you. I must have left out one slide. Can you go one more, Marissa, or maybe I messed up? Nope, go back. I'm sorry. I must have, 1450. Thank you. This is the transitional kindergarten, and the gentleman on on your screen that's kind of jumping. That's me. That we have fought really long and hard for transitional kindergarten, and I'll be very brief, but it's a program that started years ago in Bellingham called Promise K, and districts have always been able to, on a case-by-case basis, put kids younger than 5 in kindergarten if they demonstrate a need. And Christy Dominguez, who's now the superintendent at Ferndale, uh, got a program going in Bellingham when she was the early childhood director there for that school district. And this again called Promise K, where they would bring in kids younger to do an early kindergarten, which now is called transitional kindergarten or transition to kindergarten. And some of you may have that program in your district. Currently, it's funded by the state. It's not considered basic ed. And there's a shortfall in the funding this current school year because the caseload forecast was too low. There were more districts that decided to have transitional kindergarten than was projected. So we're hoping that this current legislature will kick in enough money to make those districts whole. They only have enough money through March for the program. They're obviously probably going to continue running the program because they've already hired the teacher, and it has to have a teacher, a parapro, but it's a great program. Representative Santos, who often is a great supporter and advocate for K-12 on this issue, she's concerned that some districts are poaching kids, 4-year-olds, from private or nonprofit daycare centers and early childhood providers. And I don't think that's happening very often. And if that is, that should be a situation which should be able to work that remedy with that district and those providers, not painting a brush through all statewide that this is happening all across the state. It's not. And the data on this, the Walk Kids assessment, is showing that kids that enter transitional kindergarten and complete the program are really better prepared for kindergarten than kids who aren't. So this is a great program, and I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. The rest of the slide deck, which Marissa will provide you, has a lot of information about the new transitional kindergarten bill that was just heard last week. And it's also encouraging folks to attend board members are also very much encouraged to attend the small schools conference, the spring conference from small school leaders that's coming up anyhow. So but you'll be able to scroll through and see, and again, there's a number of slides on the transitional kindergarten bill. I went through and kind of dissected the bill. So that's all in the slide deck.
Yeah, I just noticed there are 37 pages, so there's lots to go through. You are thorough, so I appreciate that. And yes, I did hyperlink your presentation in the agenda, which is in the chat for folks to download. And so that presentation and all the additional content will be there. Jim, we are so grateful for your partnership, leadership, and championing of small schools. I think we feel kindred partnership in that. One of the reasons why the priorities that WASDA, WASA, many of our other education stakeholders selected to focus on MSOC, special education, and transportation is that these are rural school issues. They are all school issues, but we know that where all schools are impacted financially, small schools are disproportionately impacted in a way that is important for us to be able to explain to our legislators. I'm curious, I didn't prepare you for this question, but I just wonder if you have in your back pocket, are there some legislators who you see as particular champions for small schools? Like they get it, they live there, they're the consistent voice in terms of education. What any names come to mind?
Yes, Senator Lisa Wellman comes to mind. I haven't
Mhm.
always agreed with Lisa. Most time I do, but she, I think, really in her heart wants to help all school districts, urban, rural, east, west, big, small. She will spend a lot of time visiting ESDs and school districts all across the state. Um, the Representative Lisa Callan, I think, is a very strong supporter. I believe she's a former board member, and
She
I
is.
uh,
Mhm.
very strong supporter. She is the vice chair of the House Capital Budget. The hope is at some point she will become the chair of the House Capital Budget Committee. But she also has in her heart a real, like Nikki, who's going to talk in a little bit, a real big place in our heart for kids that are struggling and with all kinds of issues, and how can we as a school system and as a community help those kids. And it's in our core. So those are two that come to mind right away.
Nice.
Representative Santos, I think, is a champion for education. The
Yeah.
PK thing is we don't agree. I don't agree with her stance on it right now, but overall, I think she's been very supportive. She's made a comment that she will, as long as she's chair of the House Education Committee, which she's been chair for over 20 years, she will not have a bill come out of her committee that would force consolidation. So
Yeah.
that's appreciated. Those are the folks that come to mind right now. I'm sure
That's
there's
great.
others, but
Those are important people to have on our side for sure. um, you were talking about transition to kindergarten, and in the last legislative session, well, in the 2023 session, when this House version of the bill that we're currently seeing came out of the House, WASDA members hadn't yet adopted a position on transition to kindergarten, but have since adopted a position. We're still trying to figure out how to unpack that policy proposal and also what the real concern is. And so my understanding, and you were explaining this already, but my understanding really is that Santos believes that the school districts who are offering the TK programs aren't verifying the need. They're not screening the students rigorously enough. And so, one thing that would be helpful to bring to her and others on that committee, and maybe more appropriately now because it'll go to approps, is that school districts are doing that screening and verifying need. Is that the sense that you get in terms of the one of the more important stories to tell?
yes, and also she has said that she TTK was really designed for areas that have early learning deserts.
Mhm.
That's just about everywhere, even in urban or suburban areas. There's such a shortage of quality child care providers and early childhood providers. There's a great ECAP program across the state. It varies in quality and quantity, but the and then this bill that she's proposing to make changes to TTK. Some of the things in the bill are already in the statute of the bill that passed last year, but some of them it gives more authority to DCYF, who has overseen ECAP and all that. And the school districts are doing a great job. One difference is for ECAP, you don't have to have a certificate teacher,
Right.
and with transitional kindergarten, you do. And then the
Mhm.
funding structure would change. Right now, districts receive the same amount of funding that they do for a TK kid, they do, say, for a first or second grader, and including transportation. So many TK kids are transported on the buses. Or, but that the new bill goes back to the ECAP rate per kid, and it's less. And that's a concern because even if we continue the same rate, we all know that basic ed is not amply funded right now. The formulas are amply are funded, but some of the formulas are crazy.
Yeah, totally outdated to meet the need. Jim, so grateful for you being here. Nobody has any questions, so I guess you answered them all that they had them. But I did hyperlink your name in the agenda with your email address in case anybody wanted to follow up. But I bet you we're going to hear from you again in the next 11 weeks. So I appreciate you being here and grateful for your advocacy.
Thank you, and thanks you all the board members. I don't miss long board meetings when I was a superintendent, but I miss the connection with board members that I would make at board meetings or basketball games or open houses or whatever. And the work that you do is so very important, especially now, because you're champions for your community and for your kids, and just keep the hope alive in your community, no matter what's going on. Try to keep that hope alive for those kids, because that's who we need to serve as the students.
Absolutely, Jim. Thank you so much for your leadership. Okay. Well, with that, speaking of great school directors who maintain and elevate hope for their students and staff in their communities, Laura Caillou is a school director in the Mount Vernon School District, and recently brought a group of students and staff and school directors and administration to Olympia after designing their own day on the hill. So I asked Laura to come and present a little bit of how did they do it? What are some pro tips for y'all? And what did they hear while they were up with their legislators just this past week? So, Laura, are you there and able to turn your screen on? Nice. Um,
I,
and and you have the power to share. So I would just invite you to uh, pass along any lessons learned and tips and pro tips that folks might be able to emulate. Thanks for doing this for us.
yeah, thanks for having me. And just want to acknowledge that, we're have a new superintendent and several new school board members. And so we really started this planning process in the Strategic Academy with you at the WSSDA conference. And that gave us a really good structure and space to start thinking about how we wanted to do our legislative work. And we knew we really wanted to get a lot more people involved than had been involved before. Usually it would be the superintendent and administrator, maybe our finance director, um, and just a really small group going down to Olympia. So this year we did our superintendent reached out to a big group of people. It included teachers, all our 4 union representatives, about 12 students, board members, and of course our superintendent. So it was a nice big group. It was a good, 2-hour drive together down to Olympia, which was also just great to be in the bus together and have conversations that we normally wouldn't have time for. And so this is just a list. I'm sorry, I put the wrong list in here. This is our meeting times. Our staff at the superintendent's office did an amazing job of grouping all of our ledge district people into the same time slot in the same meeting room. So we weren't actually running all over. We were in 2 different spaces, meeting with all of our reps. We have 3 districts, the 10th, the 40th, and the 39th. We met with everyone except for Clyde Shavers.
Can I ask before you move on, Laura?
You bet.
Would you say again who coordinated those meetings for you? And did you hear about how that went? Anything to pass along in terms of overcoming any obstacles that you learned about?
No, they did it so beautifully and efficiently. It was our superintendent's administrative assistant who did that work. She reached out to aides and they just really put in a big effort. I think Amanda Hubick was one of the aide to Representative Rammel, did a lot of groundwork for us. But other than that, I don't know.
That's great. Well, if you didn't hear about challenges, maybe it went smoothly. So appreciate that there was someone in central admin who was able and willing to make those appointments. Looks very well organized. I appreciate a good color coded chart.
Super organized, and I think she probably did have moments of her pulling her hair out, but she didn't share it with us. So we're very thankful. This was our list of the people who went down. So again, color coded by the type of position they held. And this is our group and this was our third meeting of the day, but we were in this new building, new space for two of the meetings, and it was really fun when Senator Muzzall walked in and saw the size of the group. His eyebrows went up and he kind of took a step backwards. And so it was nice to feel like just the physical presence made an impact. So just a few pictures. This was the other space we were in. And the cool thing was these are the 4 students on the left that we had as the primary speakers. And the quality of the engagement between our legislators and the students was really beautiful. They were super attentive. They asked a lot of questions. They had a good time, encouraged the students, and our students were so really, like ready to do more after it was over. They really enjoyed the interaction. And some of them were already reaching out to their elected officials to arrange one-on-ones. They had offered that up to some of the students as well. Another student picture, our students were very articulate, very passionate. We did a little agenda timeline for what our speakers were going to be. Their bullet points, and you could see that our board chair had 2 minutes, our board superintendent had 2 minutes, and then all of the data about, we stuck to the big 3. The students shared, but then they each told a personal story about how having less funding in the district had impacted them or had impacted some group of students that they knew about. So I plugged in some of their speaking notes, did a beautiful job. And then Marissa linked in the handout that we left with our legislators, and our communications did a little video on Instagram at the end of the day. Our representatives, our legislators from the 40th were probably the most encouraging. They talked mostly about, the most about seeking a revenue solution so that they could fund the big 3, knowing, and they repeated back to the students like so clearly how they understood those impacts. In the morning when we were with Senator Muzzall, he was probably the least optimistic in terms of saying that he felt like there was something that could be done in this session. So it was a good experience. I don't know if there's any questions or anything else I can add.
I don't see any questions in the Q&A. It sounds like if someone were to try to replicate this, if another school district who's listening is like, ooh, we haven't done this yet, I would just let you all know in the audience that it's never too late to bring a team of folks to the Capitol to influence decisions. We literally have 88 more days until some of the final decisions will be made. Well, maybe more like 81. 88 days left of session, but way more opportunity to influence. And so sounds like some of the things that were helpful for you, Laura, were that you had district staff help to support the coordination and organization of the meetings.
Completely.
That might be a helpful ask to find out if there's capacity with your own school district to do that. Remember, you're advocating for additional resources and funding. So while you are already stretched right now, we totally understand a good use of your time to raise issue about the important things to support. So hopefully you have more capacity in the future. It also sounds like bringing a student or 2 or 3 or 4 might be highly influential in getting the message across. Sounded like that was kind of the sweet spots for you, and those were the individuals who got invites for one-on-one meetings. So
That's right.
yeah, so that's good. Everybody's heart's in the right place there. Any other sort of like what worked well and you would recommend for others in terms of making it effective?
I think making sure to invite the union representatives, some of the PSE staff were on the Hill and they saw us there with our PSE reps, and that was really meaningful. And we're working on just strengthening those relationships, and that we're on the same page. We want the same things, and I think that was super helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Coming as a unified K-12 team makes a lot of good sense. Thank you for that. I also am aware that North Shore School District was down at the Capitol earlier this week. I think they went on Monday. You went on Tuesday, Laura, is that right?
Tuesday, right? Mm-hmm.
And then y'all might see in the Q&A there that South Kitsap, Bremerton, and Central Kitsap are working together to go on March 17th. So they coordinated sort of a regional school district day on the Hill. So love seeing these models about how you all are finding solutions to ensuring that you get to have a physical presence at the Capitol. I sort of love how this is happening organically. This is what I was secretly hoping for when WASDA WASA WASBO said, it's really more effective for you to be doing this individually as school districts as opposed to us just flooding the Capitol on one single day. What I'm starting to sense is that because you all are scheduling that, you're taking little bite-sized chunks of the conversation and keeping them alive with our legislators. So it's a really great scaffolded approach to making sure we're keeping a physical presence, telling emotionally compelling stories directly from students who are impacted by these decisions, and we're sort of keeping the constant messaging collectively with our legislators. So thank you for modeling what that looks like, Laura and Mount Vernon, and I hope more folks follow your lead. I also included your email address in a link to your name in case folks have any follow-up questions. The handouts that you referenced are hyperlinked in the agenda. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it. Great. Looks like Jackie North Shore said that you'll all be going down with your PTSA next month and planning to do that multiple times. So that's great. Yeah, I mean, by all means, if you have the bandwidth and resources to get down to Olympia more than once, scheduling some day on the hills, and then possibly while you're there, there might be an opportunity to testify in one of the education committees or perhaps in one of the budget committees. They're meeting like almost every day right now, 3 days a week with lots of overlap. So if you're interested in figuring out how to testify while you're down there, whether or not there's something that would be relevant to the work, please reach out, and I'm happy to help you navigate that if that's something of interest. All right. Great. So we're just moving right along. Lots of learning going on. I'm going to pull up our in-session agenda, make sure we're on track here. And I think where we are at now, just just a brief overview of week 3. That's the week that we're currently in. Lots of special education conversations this week. So I understand that Senator Peterson's special education bill, that's 5263, that was heard in committee last week, was actually passed out of Senate Education this morning. That's that 10:30 hearing overlapping with the start of this time. There were amendments to that bill. My understanding, just anecdotally, is that Senator Wellman and several others connected Senator Peterson's special education bill to some other important policies. So there were 2 sped bills heard last week, including a Wellman version, and she got Senator Peterson's approval to tack on some of the good policies from her version of the bill onto his so that they could go together. And we will provide a more detailed overview of what all came out of Senate Ed going to Ways and Means related to that special education bill. Today in House Appropriations at 4 o'clock, there are also some special education bills, just at a high level. 1310 is the most comprehensive special education bill in front of us for this legislative session. This is the one that Representative Jerry Paulette has been working on, well, really for many years, but certainly was having conversations with us in the interim of this last legislative session. And this is the one we will hear today. Lavon Williams, our advocacy and policy analyst, will be representing WSSDA in strong, strong support and gratitude for Representative Paulette for bringing this policy forward. It's our understanding that this version of the bill, while it is optimal and our ideal approach to solving for the special education underfunding issue and also ensuring a more inclusive learning environment for our students, will probably not be the vehicle that will move forward. 1357 is a more likely vehicle. That is Representative Stonier's bill. It does increase the multiplier, but at a lower rate than the Paulette version. So we will be testifying today as other on this bill, that we are grateful for Representative Stonier bringing this bill forward, that it is moving the needle in the multiplier in the right direction, but it doesn't go far enough for the multiplier, and it certainly doesn't even address the removal of the cap, much less the needs for inclusionary practices. So those will be some of our remarks. We've already talked with Representative Stonier about that. She is hopeful that this bill is just sort of foundational and that it'll look more like Paulette's version. My guess is that will probably on the House side fall somewhere in between. And then the 1267 is Representative Couture's bill. And this addresses the cap explicitly. It phases the cap out over time to eventually remove it entirely by 2028. We'll send in pro on this one. It's a good bill. It moves in the right direction. But like Representative Stonier's bill, we need more. What we certainly don't want to have happen, I don't think legislators want this either, is for them to work this hard to pass a special education bill and it not be enough. And we're having this conversation again next year and the year after that. So, these bills alone, with the exception of 1310, don't solve the full problem, don't fund all of the underfunding that you are all currently experiencing. So until they actually do something like 1310, we're going to have to keep coming back to fill those gaps. So those are some of our messages. 5253 was about really the title actually does reflect what's in the bill. Sometimes that's not always the case, but this one would extend services through the age of 22 and the end of the school year. We did sign in pro on this one, but we asked that 1310 be the support to ensure that 5253 be done meeting the needs of the students, regardless of their age, through the age of 21. So just a little review of week 3. And with that, I wanted to invite your WSSDA Vice President, Nikki Lockwood, who's wearing many hats. She's the Vice President of WSSDA. She's also the President of Spokane Public Schools, and wanted to invite her to have a little conversation today about special education. She's been a huge champion for this work and a huge champion for all of you. Nikki, would you like to say anything about sort of why you're here and how special education has really impacted your own district needs? I understand it's one of your Spokane priorities too. So will you tell us a little bit about the why behind all that?
Sure. Okay, I wasn't sure.
You are.
I'm still seeing the agenda. Yeah, well, I'm very happy to be here. Spokane Public Schools has a priority to fully fund special education, and so we appreciate that it's also a WSSDA priority. It's been a legislative priority for us since I've been on the school board, and I was elected in 2019. Our school district has done a lot of work to improve services. I was one of those parents advocating for that before I was a school board member, and it really, encouraged me to keep moving towards systemic change and then ultimately run for the school board. But we have done a lot of work, and every incremental change that the state legislature has done has proven to benefit our students. And so There are so many ways that there's so much to talk about. I don't even know where to start. But I would say, yeah, I will say that we currently use levy dollars. We use around over $3 million dollars from our levy funds to fill the gap that we currently have, the deficit. And we're a real hub for healthcare in Spokane. And so, and we're not the only district here too. And I think somebody from Central Valley is on today. And so, you know, housing has been less expensive in the past. And so, we're a hub for healthcare. So a lot of families come and live here so they can access healthcare, sometimes for their kids with disabilities. And then also in the past, real estate was less expensive on the east side. And so a lot of group homes serving students with sometimes really high needs and severe disabilities are in our local school districts. And so our numbers are higher. Spokane Public Schools has 17% of our students with special needs. I'm not quite sure what Central Valley's is, but we have always been above the cap. They keep raising it and they're getting closer, but we've always been above the cap.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a nice overview. I imagine as you're telling these stories, the other school districts that are listening are able to relate to some of
Yeah.
that or all of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's just say in the ideal world, 1310 were funded, comprehensive funding for special education to meet the actual needs. What would your district be able to do more of differently that that would make the work more effective in drawing the right student outcomes that you're going for?
Yeah, there are so many things that we could do more of or do differently. One of the things that we've started to do is the comprehensive inclusion training, professional development. We've been doing that for a few years. It started with the OSPI grant and some inclusion work in our district, just with some webinars and just a real community push to have this in our schools. And so we've started that, but that is part of staffing and that is part of ongoing training. So those costs, would be covered with that increase there. Our goal is 80% of our students with disabilities are in general ed 80% of the time. And we're not quite there yet at secondary, but we've made good improvements, but that money would help fund that. Behavior management is a big area of need. And I think educators, and you would hear this from WEA as well, but just the mental health supports and the behavioral training that's required and that our educators and paraeducators would benefit from in serving these students is ongoing. I just got some information from our data person that like about 42% of our paraeducators are in their first 3 years of service to our school district. And so there's a lot of training with those new staff. And they said about every year we have, 10 to 15% brand new staff. And so it's a lot of training. So that is an ongoing need. And then and part of the behavior management is we have been able to have some smaller class sizes, and the ESSER funds really helped us get there for those kids with the most, behaviorally challenged needs. And so, that money's gone. And so that is definitely something we would look forward to, the state funding. Our post-secondary experiences for our transition students, those kids or our young adults from 18 to 22 that we're still serving, that takes a lot of training and time. And I spent half a day with some of those students yesterday and saw the work that they're doing and the things that they're learning. And it's so holistic. They're learning job skills, they're working, they're being valued by their work relationships, but they're also learning to build community. And like, what does that mean? How do you hang out on Friday night? What are the steps you need to learn? Because we know that having community and significant relationships is an important part of thriving. And it's been something we need to do more for our people with disabilities in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could keep going.
I know I
yeah,
so
yeah.
appreciate your passion. How did you, I think it's important for our school directors as well as our legislators to actually see some of these positive, effective programs in action as you were just describing. So, just in case folks haven't had a chance to actually get into those classrooms, how did you access that? Like, what were the conversations that you had in terms of process? Are there parameters around it? And then have you invited legislators into those spaces at all? And how have those experiences gone?
Yeah, well, as far as the inclusion work goes, we were a model site. I can't think of what it's called. That's not the right terminology, but they would do presentations for people statewide. And so I went to one of those because I was really curious about it. It was at one of our middle schools. And so then I invited our legislators to come. And I think 2 out of the 3 came and saw that. It was really impressive. And they got to be in the classroom and just see the data and the work that's happening, and also the staffing changes that it requires, but that the staff are really buying into. As far as the transition work, every school board member has a list of schools that they're supposed to visit every year. And, we're a big school district. We have 57 schools. So we split it up. And that was just one of the schools that I had, was the transition programs. We have actually 3 mini programs within that. And so I don't know that we've ever done that before, but they knew where my heart was. And so I spent half a day visiting job sites and then one of the classrooms. And so I really got to see that. And I do think that would be a great experience for our legislators to do, even if they could spend half the time
Yeah.
visit one site. Yeah.
So important to be able to show, with the resources we have, this is what we're doing that has a positive impact. And if we were adequately funded, here's what else we could do, expanding the
Yeah.
program and what other gaps exist.
Yeah, because they said we could serve more students if we had more staff
Yeah.
at that transition level.
Yep.
So.
That seems like just sort of simple math.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Also, I understand you are about to get on a plane to go to Washington, D.C. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
part of the Federal Relations Network. It's my first time going. Really
Okay.
interesting year to be going.
No doubt.
But I hope to learn a lot, and I can certainly share what we've been doing in terms of special education. But we're also talking to them about school meals and E-rate and impact fees and mental health supports for our students. And I feel like special education and mental health supports really go hand in hand. One thing that one of our educators talked about, our special ed director, is that there's a lot of we could look at pre-referral work, because referring to for an IEP and special education is a whole process, but there's a lot of pre-referral work that could happen if we had more psychologists and we could address those needs and work into the MTSS staffing and the just changing, getting that work done earlier, and maybe with a less cumbersome process, some of the specific and complex needs that we're seeing in our school district.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for not only doing this work here in Washington State, but getting on a plane to go do it in Washington, D.C. There's lots of moving parts as it relates to federal and state funding and communication and programming. And so, in case folks who are here today didn't know, that WSSDA has a federal relations network that you all have an opportunity to participate in. This is sort of the most robust part of the year, because starting at the annual conference, the FRN meets to identify what its priorities are going to be going into the National School Boards Association Advocacy Institute and Day on the Hill. And so those priorities were established back in November and refined in December and January. So I think, going into the conversations with, here are some things that are important to Washington State, but also we've got a lot to learn from you too. So there's a real relationship building opportunity right now. So thank you for doing that in the midst of everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a new congressperson in the 5th district, and he's on the education committee. So this is a real opportunity for us too. And his kids go to in our school district. So
That's great.
excited to
Yeah,
do
so
that.
we'll probably ask some of you who attended to give a debrief next week, because we'll be interested to hear what you learned. So thank you for your advocacy at home, for the state, and for the nation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks, Nikki. You do it. Okay, everybody, we're nearing the end of time, but I wanted to be sure to point you to a few more resources because these are all big topics that we're addressing here. And we never want you to feel like you have to recreate the wheel because you don't, because a lot of this work is being done for you. Let's see here. I am not seeing where my screen share is going to work for me. So I'm going to close this. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I hope you're seeing InSession Live's agenda today. Just wanted to be sure that you saw underneath Nikki's name is a list of multiple topic briefs. One that WSSDA designed specifically to provide you with talking points for your legislators. Two very well done reports done by the Joint Legislative Audit Review on special education in two different areas, one on service delivery and support systems, and then also on the funding formulas. Don't worry, you don't have to read a whole report. There's a very well done executive summary for both of them, and I feel like you could share that information with your legislators. An easy thing would be, hey, last week or the week before, the JLARC provided their report to House Appropriations. And this was the report they used here. Some of the highlights from the executive summary. I'd encourage you to read it. So just something to remind your legislators, it's not just an issue that your own districts are paying attention to, but actually state organizations are being called to do audit reviews to identify gaps and propose solutions. Then there's the special education policy brief that we released as a part of the WASA, WASDA, WASBO legislative conference. Some good talking points in there, also shareable. And then just curious, I would encourage you to look at the Senate Democrats retreat, which happened last November or December. They have their agenda from their planning retreat for the 2025 legislative session, and on pages 29 and 30, they have some talking points about special education. You might want to just use their own words to help support the advocacy you're trying to do. And then in the couple minutes I have left, I just wanted to point to the fact that on our website, the week 4 schedule has already been uploaded. I am going to quickly just show you a few things from that. By the time we meet at noon, so just a reminder that the calendar for the next week is essentially set or released on Wednesday afternoon/evening. We as a staff try to post this updated document no later than Thursday morning so that we can review it here with all of you. So what you're seeing is the schedule for hearings that have bills on our bill tracker for next week, starting next Monday. There's quite a bit on here. Some of them relate to our priorities, some of them relate to our positions, and some of them don't relate to either, but actually might be issue areas of interest to you and your school district. So I would just encourage you to review the weekly schedule every week and make sure your fellow school board members are aware of what's coming up. You always have the opportunity as your own school board to weigh in, either signing in for the record or testifying. But this is where you can ask questions and get more information about what's going on with any specific bills. I would just call to the fact that one of the most important that we're hearing, there's two really important ones that we're hearing next week on material supplies and operating costs. This is Representative April Berg's bill, 1338. This is the MSOC bill we were hoping would be heard because it actually does all the things that we need to adjust for current needs and establish a rebase so that it will be updated to keep up with needs as inflation and costs change or increase, as the case may be. So I would encourage you to take a look at that and sign in or potentially testify because that's an important one. And then also that simple majority, like real simple majority, will be heard next week in House Education. That is a bill that actually is the actual simple majority, so 50%. Sometimes people call 55% simple majority. I just call that less super. There's only one kind of simple, and that's 50% plus one. So I would also encourage you to weigh in on that bill next week and bring any particular stories. especially if you're in that 50 to 54.9% range in your most recent bond failures. If you have that story to tell, it would be compelling to share why we actually need a true simple majority on this particular proposal. So that's a long game approach, but I would encourage our continued focus on it. I am past time, so I'm going to stop sharing. I would encourage you to let me know if there's any particular topics you want to be sure we address in future in-session lives. Thank you for all the work you're doing, the advocacy you are leading. We need you. Keep those conversations with your legislators going. We're still very much in the early phases with lots of room for continued conversation. Thanks for all you do. Have a great week.